I'd like to read for you the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. This is a very, very sketchy introduction to the idea of Buddhism. It's a very deep religion. Before I start, someone came up and asked me if I want to learn more, is there a book I could read? And my suggestion is a book called How to Sit. How to Sit by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a small book and very concise in its explanation of Buddhism and meditation. There are volumes written about Buddhism itself. But the Four Noble Truths form the basis of Buddhism. This was the first lesson that the Buddha taught to his students after he was enlightened under the Bodhi tree. They comprise the essence of the Buddhist philosophy. The first noble truth is that there is suffering. Suffering exists. Happiness is sweet. Suffering is bitter. To heal, we must recognize and acknowledge that suffering exists. The second noble truth is about the origin of suffering. Suffering can be described as greed, thirst, craving for things we will never get, for things that will never really make us happy. In the words of Thich Nhat Hanh, quoting, we need to recognize and identify the spiritual and material foods we have ingested that are causing our suffering. The third noble truth is the good news. There is a path out of suffering. This third truth is that healing is possible. The fourth noble truth is that the path that leads us out of suffering is to refrain from doing things that cause us to suffer. The Buddha goes into detail of this in the Noble Eightfold Path, which the Chinese translate as the path of 8 right practices. And our group will now briefly explain those concepts.
Well, the first one is right action. And keep in mind, these are a path to get out of suffering. So it's a path toward a destination, but it's not the destination itself. It's the path toward. So it's not perfect. No one expects perfection. Or we might expect it, but that's part of suffering then. So right action is the first. And right action is very broad. It means basically no killing, no stealing, no hurting sentient beings. It also includes not taking intoxicants, like drugs and alcohol, to the point of being intoxicated. It means turning away from cruel or evil acts. Now, for me personally, I've been vegetarian for over 50 years now, but I still, you know those real little ants, the little tiny ones that get in everything, I still put out poison for them, you know? I mean, I can't help it. And I still am not a vegan because I have trouble giving up cheese. So it's a process that, but it's trying to keep your actions in your thoughts so that you're aware of what you're doing and you're reminded of what you're doing, and you try your best to be non-cruel in your actions. The second one is right speech. And this is part of actions, of course, but it's more specific. And this is sometimes really hard for people. It can be hard for me in certain ways. So right speech is only speaking words that help others, making sure what you say is true as much as possible, speech that's kind, helpful, and that promotes goodwill. So you're supposed to shun gossip, argumentative speech, which is sometimes a hard one for me, false witness, words spoken in spite, not spreading rumors, and this is a little easier to see how it causes suffering for us when we do these things, because eventually a lot of this will come back onto us. If we're gossiping about other people, then often they're going to end up gossiping about us eventually. For example, I have trouble a little bit with argumentative speech sometimes because, boy, when I get hooked in an argument, it's really hard to give up the hook. But it causes a certain amount of suffering. You're not really listening to the other person. They're not really listening to you. And so this is why this is part of the path to get away from suffering. And again, it's a path.
Good morning, and thanks to all of you who came today, because the Sangha has worked hard to put this together for you. So we appreciate that there are people in the audience, right? We appreciate you more than you know. I forgot to put these on the chairs, so I'll put them on the coffee table over there. These are daily Dharma sayings written by Buddhist thinkers in Tricycle magazine, and I cut them out because they're very poignant to me. You may find some wisdom in one of these to take home with you, or not, obviously your choice, but I will put those over on the table. We want to remind you, we're not here to make Buddhists out of anyone. I've been going to Buddhist lectures by Buddhist teachers for a long time, for many years on and off, and they often say, there are lots of Buddhists in the world. We don't need any more Buddhists necessarily, but we're here to share our wisdom with you about daily life. And so I think that's in large part what the Sangha is interested in. It's Buddhist wisdom. I'm going to talk about right view and right effort, which Mariana will put on the screen. So as I take the words and the teachings of Buddha and try to break them down into something meaningful for me that's borne out by my daily experience, I will think about right view, which asks that we understand on a deep level that life is full of suffering, which you've heard as a theme here several times already, and that it happens to all of us. In other words, we tend to personalize suffering, and we think, oh my gosh, I'm in such agony, this is just me. No, it's happening to all of humankind, which I've shared with you already. That's where compassion comes from, right? The idea that suffering is personal to all of us. It's not just the me. So what have we got? We've got aging, we've got sickness, we've got pain, distress, hardship, the death of others, being apart from those we love, cravings and greed, not getting what we want, ignorance, anger, attachment. Those are all sources of suffering. Buddha, however, wanted us to experience joy, not suffering. So his teachings and this Eightfold Path, among other things, are to help us to pull ourselves out of suffering into a joyful life. Taylor Plimpton, who is a writer with a Buddhist tone to it, Buddhist wisdom, Taylor Plimpton said, one might argue that the whole purpose of Zen Buddhism is to wake you up to this simple fact. This is your life. This is it. And that's not a depressing thought, but a joyful one. This is it. This is my life. Repeat as you are willing and able. This is it. This is my life. Bingo. Very nicely done. So we take effort, right? So we get into right effort. It takes effort to get to that place where we're feeling the enlightenment or the joy. The cultivation of joyfulness teaches us a great deal about coexistence. Yes, there is affliction. There is that which is broken. There is that which is heartbreaking in life. And it lives side by side with that which is well, that which can be celebrated, that which can be appreciated. Right effort means being able to combine intention and action in order to attain this freedom from suffering. Chuck and I have a friend named Judy, and Judy just got a very difficult diagnosis at 77. It means that the next 10 years of her life are going to be increasingly full of suffering and affliction, if she wants to see it that way. And she told me that she ricochets between despair, equanimity, and sometimes joy. She goes from the sadness of having this serious diagnosis to times when she's very happy with her life and she can celebrate. And she sees the gift that life is. But it's hard. It's hard. And she's in that space. I know that I've been in that space certain times in my life, luckily not with the kind of diagnosis that Judy has. Making right effort means to be practicing mindfulness when it is most difficult to do so. That's what Buddha is asking us. Mindfulness, awareness, that's a firm and heavy anchor to the self. It can plant, when I practice it, it can plant and hold me in the present moment if I'm truly mindful, if I'm truly aware. I push myself to practice it as much of the time as I can. I'm better at it than I used to be. I remember when I was a working person, I used to sit at home at night, go through my day, and I would have these little things where in my mind it would go like, something was wrong there. Something doesn't feel good about my interaction with that student or that student's parent, perhaps. And it would wear on me. Why was that happening to me? As I look back, I say, I wasn't aware enough. I wasn't truly aware in the moment. If I'd been a more aware person at the moment that those things happened, I would have no, fix this. I can fix this. I can say something different, or I can hold myself from saying what I did say. I sound like you, Georgie. So I push myself to practice and to set aside me and to think more about the now and who are we together being here in this space now. All of this is right effort. I can practice it. My friend Judy is trying to practice it, and we can all practice it.
Well, Karen just got done telling us about mindfulness and the two noble truths that are rather, I have right mindfulness and right meditation. So I will talk a little bit just in the Eightfold Path. So I will just segue from what she was saying about being mindful. Right mindfulness means being able to practice mindfulness in every moment of one's life. Mindfulness means being aware of the exact moment you are living in, not dwelling in the past or future. It also means being mindful of others. This is one of the most useful teachings of the Buddha in the present day, when we are constantly pushed to multitask. Now, mindfulness, we hear a lot about that. It's become a thing. There are apps for mindfulness. You can get apps on your phone and your computer. I even have an app on my Apple Watch for mindfulness. But seeking true mindfulness is another matter. If you are in a monastery or a retreat or someplace that is practicing Buddhism, they will have during the day certain times when a bell will ring And whatever you're doing, you stop and you become mindful of that moment. So a dear friend of mine gave me a clock, a very nice clock with a chime on the bottom, and you could set it to ring every hour so that you could be mindful. And I thought this was a wonderful gift, so I set it up so it could chime every hour. And at first I thought this was really great. And then after a while, I would hear the chime and I would go, oh no, not again. I have to be mindful again. And I started to get really irritated. And instead of doing what it was supposed to be doing, which is making me nice and calm and mindful and peaceful, it made me irritated and annoyed me. And then I felt guilty because I was annoyed, and it started to snowball, and it was really not working for me. So I turned it off. So I found that what works better for me is to find the moments in your life as you go through your daily life that you can be mindful without having to make that kind of effort. Of course, first thing when you wake up in the morning, last thing before you go to bed at night, or times when you're waiting for something. Might even be in the doctor's office, you might be waiting for someone to come. One time that I like to do it is whenever I'm out and I come home and I park my car in the carport, and before I get out of the car, I take a mindful moment, because you have just come back safely from wherever you were in your journey, and now you are in your home and you are safe and well, and that's a good time to be mindful. So if you find times like that, that's my recommendation, so that you don't need a bell or a buzzer or some reminder from your app to be mindful. Rather, find the mindful moments in your day when you can be peaceful and truly be in the moment. So that's my recommendation from my personal experience with that. And that kind of leads into the next in the Eightfold Path, which is right meditation. Right meditation is the ability to let the mind focus on one thing, normally your breath. Since the world is full of things that we regard our minds race all the time, and especially in our modern life and our Western way of thinking, that is, we like to multitask. We like to have everything on our minds constantly. We commune instead in meditation with our inner beings, and then we commune with the universe. So I have found, again, sometimes when I try to meditate, that I find myself feeling more guilty about not being able to concentrate without letting my mind wander. And that's why the Sangha is so wonderful, because when we're together and we have a facilitator who helps us to keep our mind, prepare our mind for meditation, prepare our body for meditation, that is such a wonderful thing. But when you're on your own and you're trying to do it, it's a little bit more difficult. So Thich Nhat Hanh talks a lot about walking meditation, and I find that to be a really good way of meditating, just feeling your feet touching the earth, and again being in a mindful state where you're just aware of that moment, each step that you take. And I find that to be a very wonderful way to meditate as well. I also have been practicing Tai Chi for over 30 years. So once you learn the Tai Chi form, again, that's a moving meditation. You can just go through the movements and meditate at the same time. So sometimes, rather than trying to be still, people have the idea that you have to sit in a chair and or on a cushion and be in a certain position, and it has to be quiet, and everything has to be just right for you to meditate. Just go take a walk and concentrate on your breath and your feet hitting the earth and just where you are at that moment. So that's another little personal take on meditation that I would share with you. And I'm just going to finish up with a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. and it's about doing nothing, and that's part of meditating. It's part of being mindful, because you're doing nothing. And especially in our culture, we think doing nothing is really bad. It's a bad thing. And Thich Nhat Hanh would say that it is the best thing you can do. We think that when we are not doing anything, we are wasting our time. That is not true. Our time is first of all for us to be. To be what? To be alive, to be peace, to be joy, to be loving. And that is what the world needs the most. So we train ourselves in order to be. And if you know the art of being peace, of being solid, then you have the ground for every action. Because the ground for action is to be. And the quality of being determines the quality of doing. Action must be based on non-action.
I had last pick. Right intention. That's something that I had a lot of trouble with. Because when I was growing up, I had an aunt that no matter what she did, it screwed up. And she really ticked me off. My dad would take me aside. It was my mother's sister, but don't tell her I said that. Dad would take me aside and said, well, she meant well. My response, Dad, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Now, as I got older, I stopped doing that because I realized that my smart mouth was losing me driving privileges. I think if your intentions are not based on your ego, but really trying to help the other person, think also about how you would feel. For instance, if I tell you, you're getting fat, I might have meant well, but how's that person going to take it? So it's very important that you keep in your heart that your intentions are pure. What he writes here, I thought this was interesting. We need to have the intent to let go of our selfishness. Don't do it for you. Make sure you are really doing it for the other person. We need to embody mindfulness, which Rory just explained, and less greed, delusion, and desire. Now, actually, for me, this segued into the next final of the Eightfold Path, which was right livelihood. Not doing harm in ways of earning a living. Okay, I was a newspaper man. I ended up as sports editor, but before that I was a beat reporter, and there were times when I had to expose people who had done dumb things. Many of the time they deserved what they got. They were crooked people, they were self-absorbed. But there was one guy, one time, it was a curriculum coordinator in the Bethlehem School District, and he had taken some materials dealing with his curriculum, put them into a program, gave himself a phony name, a business in Wilkes-Barre, and sold this stuff back to the school district for which he was working. Folks, in case you haven't figured it out, that's illegal. I sat down with the guy and I said, okay, Stephen, this we know. You set up Ed Media Tech. You sold this stuff to the school district. Now, he was not a bad guy by nature. I mean, some of the other people I had to expose, really, I had no respect for anyway. But he was not a bad guy. And I could see right away he knew he was in trouble. The sweat started to come. I still felt I had no choice. He had done something wrong. It had to be exposed for the betterment of the school district. The district attorney, after he read my article, did investigate. And in one of his rare moments of divinity, I guess, this particular district attorney said, I'm not going to prosecute. It is against the law. I could prosecute, but I'm not going to. For that one time, this district attorney did his job with right intentions. So I think that your right intentions do carry over. The last line of right livelihood, it asks if you are able to live a balanced life in spite of your work. When I was sports editor, that became very difficult because I felt that I had to know everything that was going on in all sports. So I was glued to the TV reading sports books, sports magazines. I think my poor wife did not like. She didn't say very much. I could tell she didn't like it. I made a pledge. I made a New Year's pledge, okay? I'm still sports editor, but I am not going to totally read sports. I'm going to cut down on my TV viewing of sports. Well, our marriage got a lot better after that. Judy was much happier. I didn't do that much, and I did manage to live a balanced life. I do now. I tend to read a lot of Buddhism, but I do live a balanced life. Practicing kindness, dutifulness, and good conduct when working. Not everybody believes I did this. Not all of the people who read me believe I did this. But I did do it to the best of my ability. Tried to be fair. Tried to be good. Tried to employ good conduct. Sometimes it was difficult in that profession. But I'd like to think that my intentions were right. Not as my dad said, that they're always right. I'd like to think that my intentions were right. I was doing what I thought was the right thing, and I could justify it.